Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. Tonight, our guest is Jim Amann, who's a candidate for governor for the Democratic Party. Jim, you have a great narrative to tell, but let's talk about Joe Lieberman first. Tell the audience about your relationship with Joe Lieberman.
I sure will. You know, my relationship goes back with Joe. Geez, it's well over 30 years now. I can't believe time's gone by that fast. But my relationship really started when he was Attorney General, and we formed a very good friendship back then. I was young in politics in the Young Democrats. Ran for state senate. I was already an elected alderman in 1983. And 1984, somebody convinced me that running as a Democrat in '84 was a good idea. In reality, in 1984, I was running against a very well-known Republican by the name of Tom Scott. You might remember him from the income tax days.
Yep.
Tom, believe me, I was very, very pleased as a Democrat to run against Tom Scott. The bottom line is that that's when my relationship started with Joe. Joe came and he helped a lot there. But I think my friendship became strong with Senator Lieberman is when I first ran for the State House in 1990. In 1990, I ran against a very well-known person in town. He was a superintendent of, he was a principal of a school, a very well-known family, great guy actually, and it was a very tough race. And I asked Joe about a month before the end of the race came up if he would do a commercial for me. I knew I was in a tight race. And Senator Lieberman said, Jim, I'd love to come, but I just can't make it. It's going to be a tough time for me. You know, I thanked him for at least listening to me. But the day of the shoot, it was on the beach in Milford, and out of nowhere, Senator Lieberman did show up. He came on, did the TV commercial for me. It ran, 30, 40 times in the last couple of weeks. And that race, I won by 49 votes. Now, did Senator Lieberman put me over the top? Well, you know, no one will ever know. But to me, you know, the guy took the time in a busy schedule, flew in to do that for me. And then, again, I did win the race, and I was very appreciative. I think when I got sick, I had esophageal cancer in 2001. And, you know, Senator Lieberman and many other people, but Senator Lieberman was a very strong friend that was there for me, was there for the family. And, you know, those things you don't forget. And, you know, there are some things in life that are more important than politics, and certainly at that time of my life, certainly to have friends, political or non-political, was an important thing to me and my family.
Absolutely. Friendship is a very important thing. Now, the question I have to ask you to follow up, that is, for our audience, separate this, your great comradeship or friendship with Joe Lieberman for a moment and talk about Joe Lieberman's votes. It's hard to do that with people that are like family, to be critical of their behavior, but I'll give you an opportunity.
Well, you know, maybe you haven't been around my table or my family table. We certainly, I think the best criticism you do get is from your family and from your closest friends. You know, certainly I was there with Senator Lieberman when he was vice president. I was so proud of him being on the ticket. When he ran for president, I was there for him. And certainly, like I said, in 2006 when he ran for Senate, I was there for him. However, if I had a crystal ball and I'd ever think that my friend Senator Lieberman, the Democrat that I knew, especially when he was Attorney General, would be standing with Senator McCain during the presidential race against the Democrats, was furthest thing from my imagination. So certainly, and I told Joe that. I had this conversation with him, and you know, again, still being friends is one thing, but certainly politically, I think, you know, for whatever reason he did it, I certainly didn't agree with that.
How about with the health care thing that's going on
well,
now?
That's another thing. You know, it's not just Senator Lieberman. There are other Democrats, too, that have they're opposed to it. But certainly, you know, I don't want, you know, I'm glad to see that finally that they've come around on the issue. Okay. You know, and I'm glad to see that they all stuck together as 60 Democrats. That's a good thing to see. But again, if he was using that, you know, who knows? Was he using that to get the attention again for some reason? Was he doing that to be just to be opposed against President Obama? You know, again, you know, no one can get into his heart and mind and find out what the truth is. But you know, the ironic thing about that whole thing when I mentioned President Obama, in 2006, it was Senator Lieberman that introduced me to Senator Obama. And that's the most ironic thing, because they were very good friends in those days. And in fact, he told me that day, you've got to meet this guy. He's a breath of fresh air. You're going to love him. And Senator Lieberman was right. Everything he said about him was true. But
very prophetic there.
it just shows you in 3 years.
Yeah, I'm on the other end of that spectrum because
things can switch pretty quick.
yeah, I'm on the other end of that spectrum because I sat up in the rafters at the Democratic National Convention in 2004, the night that, of course, Howard Dean gave his 8-minute speech, 4 minutes of which was an ovation.
Excuse me.
And the night that Barack Obama gave that speech. And I sat up there in the rafter, and maybe it was because I was up in the rafters, maybe it's because I was so focused on Howard Dean, but I wasn't particularly impressed by Obama's speech. I thought it was a good speech. Obviously, in retrospect, when he ran for president, I went back and looked at the speech again and found it to be a fascinating speech. But at the time, it just didn't capture my imagination the way it captured so many other people's imagination. Let's backtrack a little bit again to who you are. What are your roots? Where do you come from?
Well, you know, I'm a Milford guy. I'm a beach kid. I grew up in the beach in Milford, but surprisingly, some of my old family roots are right in this area, Reading, Connecticut. Some of the founding fathers were my family, the Patchins, the Perrys, the Smiths, and many other names. And in fact, my grandmother brought me up here, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. We visited the grave of where a lot of them were, videotaped it with Grandma telling stories. So I have a lot of good Connecticut roots, but I'm an Irish-German with a background also, and very proud of my roots. Milford's been a great town for my family, for myself, and you know, I didn't think as a kid I didn't realize how lucky I was to have Long Island Sound as my backyard, where, you know, fishing, swimming, all the great things that come with living on a shoreline, and I was a pretty lucky kid.
We might have met, actually, because you know my cousin Paul Lofgren, and we might have actually met somewhere along the way.
You never know.
Because my mom used to ring me up every Saturday morning. She was going to University of Bridgeport getting her master's in education, and she dropped me off, and I spent the whole Saturday with Paul and Liz and Hildy.
Yeah.
And of course, their mom and dad. But tell the audience about your accomplishments. And we know you're the Speaker of the House for many years, that you relinquished in order to run for governor. But tell us about your accomplishments during your time as Speaker of the House.
Well, certainly I think when I was Speaker, and not just legislatively, but working collectively with a very diverse group of political people. And I think that's what's important for people to remember when they may think about my position with Joe Lieberman and other things. Remember, I was the Speaker of the House voted in by my Democratic caucus, and a very diverse group, probably 2/3 more progressive than, probably more than 2/3 progressive, and they voted for me for a reason, and I think they supported me for Speaker of the House because they knew I was a fair person. I made sure I listened to all sides and made sure that we would find a consensus as Democrats. And we did extremely well in the 4 years that I was Speaker of the House. I was Majority Leader before that. But think about the accomplishments that we did have. We had 4 balanced budgets, and Rel can say whatever she wants. It was the Democratic caucus that put those budgets together. People forget there's 3 branches of government, Dave. We put the budget together, not the governor. Governor, there's an old saying, the governor proposes and the legislature disposes. It's our job to be the watchers of the purse strings. And again, we turned 3 out of those 4 years of deficits into surpluses. We ended up with a $1.6 billion rainy day fund. We also had record number of investment in housing while I was Speaker, in aid to cities, in hospital support, in health care and education. So we have a very proud record. Campaign finance reform happened under my watch. Also, issues dealing with teacher retirement pension. You know, a lot of teachers out there were very concerned about the payment into pensions, and what we did is we found a win-win situation. I think that's what's important in politics today, is create win-wins. And we not only made sure that the teachers had their pension secure for the next 25 years, but on top of it found a way to save taxpayers $2.8 billion over those 25 years. That's what real Democrats do. You hear about tax and spend, but we try to do is be more effective, more efficient, talk about investing in people versus reaction. It's better to have prevention programs than have than to react towards problems, and I think that's been the record of success. And the last but not least, transportation. Again, we were the ones that pushed the governor, who put a measly $1 billion on the table in a $12 billion problem. We pushed it to $3.6 billion. If we had a Democratic governor in there, I believe we would have had, way before President Obama talked about investing in infrastructure, we were doing it. We were fixing our bridges. We were investing in those things to make sure that we had a good infrastructure program, and that's going to continue, I hope, down the next
And building up,
few
as you
years.
mentioned, that rainy day fund at the same
Yes,
time.
right,
Now,
correct.
it was during, obviously, nationally, it was during the Clinton years, that the 90s, that we paid down some of the deficit.
We sure
had.
did.
We had surpluses during those years.
We
Now,
sure
we're talking
did.
Connecticut. We're actually talking about after that period of time then.
Correct. Right. This was in 2005 to right till 2009. And I think people also have a pretty short memory. You know, the Connecticut legislature didn't create these huge deficits that we're in right now. That came from a guy by the name of President Bush. This happened nationwide. This wasn't just a Connecticut problem. 48 states experienced a very difficult time these last 2 years. And now President Obama's in there. He was handed this football, and everybody expects him in one short year to score a touchdown. I think it's going to be it's been tough. He's made some tough decisions. But, you know, I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. I think what the president needs to do, though, is to focus in on job creation and job retention. I hope now that this health care debate's going forward, that we really get into, I think, what this is really the true stimulus program, which is creating opportunities for American people.
You know, a lot of us are very disappointed with what looks like it's going to be the final product, although I think it's fair to say that if it's only a first step, it's at least a first step in the right direction. And as you say, it's hard to, you know, you can't do everything all at once. You can't erase 8 years of horror in a matter of a year. You have to do things incrementally. And as I say, none of us are, at least none of my friends are very happy. A lot of us are actually talking about, you know, shoot the damn thing down because it's so bad. But I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I have to look at the bill and look at the way the pluses and the minuses in it and see if there's some shred of goodness in it that's at least heading us in the right direction. Talk about energy in terms of Connecticut, and we're going to talk about your vision for the state of Connecticut going forward. But let's go issue by issue. Green jobs, energy, things of that nature.
Such a great opportunity. We started back in 2006, 2007. We certainly looked to try to make sure that we were heading towards a green economy. If you remember, we started right off the bat by giving household owners ways to have incentives to people come in, get tax breaks when they bought efficient energy supplies and those sort of things. And then now we've opened it up now to make sure that we are creating more opportunities and tax credits for small businesses that are developing fuel cell, wind, and certainly solar. And you're going to see a lot more of that. There's a lot of opportunities through the state of Connecticut. I think we have to give more incentives in order to help the small businesses grow. I am glad to see that part of this bill that they've done down in Washington does help small business. Excuse me.
Yeah.
A little bit of a cold. Small businesses, as far as their health care costs, that's going to be able to free up money for them to reinvest back in their businesses. So, yeah, I mean, people don't realize that Connecticut, fuel cell, for example, we are leaders in the nation, if not the world, in fuel cell. In fact, we have the only fuel cell that's up on the space shuttle is by a Connecticut company. So,
right here in Danbury.
You know, you're darn right, and you should be proud of that. And the more, if you look at Connecticut and look at the kind of workers that we've had historically, we have some of the smartest, most ingenious workers, high-skilled, educated. We just need to give them the opportunities as we gave them in the past. If we're going to compete against China, Brazil, and India, the only thing we can do is continue to try to invest in our people and make sure that they have the tools to be successful.
We're losing jobs for 18 years now, I think. How do we stop that brain drain?
Boy, I'll tell you, Dave, I don't understand it. We've had 3 governors, Weicker, Rowland, and Rell. And I hate to even say this, but at least Rowland tried to go to Washington once in a while to try to stimulate some interest in the state of Connecticut. Our current governor missed 5 out of the last 6 governor
The conferences?
conferences.
The national conferences?
She missed 5 of the last 6. And what's important to people understand that these conferences, what a governor does at a conference, is not only to learn about what's going on globally, but to learn what the competition is across the nation, but also to market themselves at these meetings with a lot of business people of why you should come to Connecticut. If you have a governor that's a no-show at these things, the results are exactly what you're seeing. We're 50th in job growth. We need to understand that, A, if you're right, if you're going to keep the young people here, you have to give them a reason to stay. When a young person today gets out of college, A, they usually have to go home and live with mom and dad because they can't afford the housing, or they're going to get out of Connecticut because there's no opportunities for work here. So let's concentrate on that first. We need to make sure that the young person, when they got out of college, that we should help them as a state government to, if you say stay here and work here for 2 or 4 years, we're going to help you with your tuition, we're going to help you with housing. Those sort of things are going to keep young people here, and that's going to invest in our state long term to keep the young people here. And not have that brain drain.
That's a refreshing thing compared to what I guess most states do in terms of they attract companies by giving them incredible incentives. And Pfizer's a good example. A company that got incentives for X numbers of years, and sure enough, when that last year arrived, gone.
Right, and this is right, and we should learn from the past. Incentives are good if they're done right. If you look what Delaware does with incentives and why they're the smallest state in the nation is a corporation capital of the world, because they have a tax code that welcomes businesses, but they also have a very equal way of making it responsible that the corporate person is responsible to the worker and the state. There's a dual agreement there. So the Macy's of the world, if you remember that one, back when Weicker got $5 million, the day they got the money, back then, they bolted. There was no way of keeping them here. So they learned to at least have an incentive to say, here's the date, we cut off the date, and then, but as you said, as soon as the dates are over, they bolt out of here. You have to have programs here that are more sustainable and make more sense and have a dual purpose. A, supportive of the worker and also supportive of the company, but making sure that that language is tight language and there's a clear understanding of who's doing what when they come to these agreements. But you're right, let's invest in our young people. We are an aging state. The baby boomers, and I know I'm one. Dave, I'm not going to throw you under the bus, but I'm a baby boomer, and we're an aging population, and we need to have the young people take care of us because the strain on our state in the next 20 years, because of our senior population, is going to be tremendous. So you need to invest in those kids, give them tuition breaks, stay in the state, work here in the state. Let's try to help them get affordable housing so they stay here, work here, and then hopefully love it enough to want to bring their families up here.
Establish themselves here.
Right.
So it's really, in fact, it sounds to me more like grassroots rather than top-down a way to keep jobs here in the state. Maybe you bring a little bit from the top into the companies to stay here for a period of time, but at the same time invest in the workers themselves to make them stay here, to encourage them to stay here.
Right, right. I mean, if you look at the Connecticut right now, insurance industry, healthcare industry, finance industry, we hope it's just going to make a comeback. But those sort of things, yes, you can give some incentives to the companies themselves, but it makes more sense to invest in the people. For example, healthcare is one of the most growing field in the nation, but certainly in Connecticut, it is one that needs more investment. We have a shortage of nurses, 73,000 nurses. We have a shortage of doctors, so we need to make sure that we invest in those people that come to Connecticut and say, hey, why not make it a mecca to come to the state? Why can't we make it a mecca to come to stay in the state instead of going to Florida in other states when you get to a certain age. Keep that money here. Most of the people that have money are most of the people that are over the age of 50 years of age. So what we do is they want to do as soon as they get that age is get out of Connecticut because of high taxes, et cetera. So there also should be a program at the other end to say, listen, you know, at a certain age, we're going to help you by starting to lower your taxes a little bit, give you some breaks, give them incentives to stay here. There's a couple of towns right now in the state of Connecticut that are actually smart enough that they're opening in communities that are opening their arms to seniors, and that's by giving them tax breaks, housing breaks. You come to this town, you come here, you live in our assisted living place, we're going to give you a tax break. So the biggest thing that seniors worry about is what? That they're going to have their nest egg taken away from them at the end of their life because of taxes and because of health care. We need to reverse that thinking, so not only do we get the young people here, but keep our senior population here too.
And of course, a lot of them are veterans, and we do have a lot of the towns, I don't know if all of them do, but I know a lot of the towns have special incentives for veterans in terms of freezing property taxes or limiting the growth of property taxes. Tell the audience about your part in bringing us public finance, public campaign financing in Connecticut, and look forward and tell the audience how we're going to correct the problems that are in that bill, which the court shot down because of that.
I apologize.
That's all right.
I mean, a lot of people out there understand colds this time of year.
Yeah.
Listen, the reason why we campaign finance reform, people might have forgotten, is because we had a guy by the name of John Rowland. So we went in there to make sure that there's a fairness in the system, but more importantly, transparency. People have to know that when Dave gives a contribution, where did that contribution go and why did it go there? There's nothing wrong with transparency, and that's part of the bill. Campaign finance reform is probably, we are looked at nationally right now as a leader in this particular category.
Along with Arizona and Maine, yep.
John Larson, our own congressman, wants to introduce a bill very similar down in Washington. It's something that all of us should be striving for. But just like in any bill, sometimes there's a problem, somebody challenges it. As we know, it's going through the court systems now. I think with some tinkering on the bill, some adjusting on it, we can have a better bill, a bill that will pass muster or the smell test, whatever you want to call it, to make it constitutional. We have some pretty smart guys and gals up in Hartford that can do that, and we hope that they're going to be making some corrections. I think there are some questions that need to be addressed. Is it fair that if you are a lobbyist or a contractor, should every member of your family not be able to contribute? I think we need to look at that because there are some constitutional questions when it comes to that. I mean, for example, I know my wife. If I was a lobbyist and my wife was told that, what do you mean I can't donate to Dave? I like Dave. I've known Dave for 30 years. You mean I can't go and donate my $50 to Dave because you're a lobbyist? Well, there are constitutional questions on those sort of things.
Discussion in and of itself.
Right, exactly. So I think there are areas where we can adjust it. I don't think you need to rechange it too much, but I believe we can make it constitutional and move on. But I think, quite frankly, that it's something that every taxpayer should want for their elected official. Transparency, there's nothing wrong with the American system of people wanting to support a candidate with $1 or $100, which is our limit right now as an actual candidate.
Right.
But they also, I think people also have the right to know who your supporters are, and I think that makes it a better democracy for all of us.
Yeah, as a quick aside, the audience knows that I had a couple weeks ago two members of the Green Party and John Hartwell from Democracy for America on, and they were of a unanimous. They disagreed about some other points, but they were of the same mind that minor party candidates need to have a level playing field. But that's I guess that's basically the main objection that the court had to the bill. But as you say, it's a good bill. It creates transparency. It makes for clean elections, and that's the overarching goal.
I think they're absolutely right on. I think some of the thinking from some legislators, unfortunately, was that they were thinking, well, we don't want 50 or 100 or 200 people running for the same office. But the bottom line is that you want to also make sure that there is an evenness across the playing field for anybody to participate. And let me, if you, what scares me most now is what I'm seeing with a few of the candidates that have very, very deep pockets. Now listen, this is America, it's a capitalistic society. I do not say anything wrong with someone that's made a lot of money and it's been successful. We certainly want to support that. It's an American dream. However, I remember from my history books, there was a reason why we left England. I think because there was like noblemen and kings and queens and monarchs, etc. I don't want to have our political system turn into one that basically people who have enough money can buy a seat. I think it's important that you have that level playing field for a Green Party or anybody to say, listen, I have just as much right to run for office as anybody else, and we have to level that playing field, and I think more so now in government than ever before.
Yeah, we've got about 2 minutes left. To wrap up, we've got a lot of good candidates running for governor on the Democratic ticket. We've got Ned Lamont, we've got Rudy Marconi, we've got Gary LeBeau, we've got Dan Malloy, and we've got Susan Bysowitz, and we have Jim Amann.
Yes.
Tell our audience why Jim Amann is the best of the group. Why are you the best qualified individual to be the governor of the great state in Connecticut?
Nobody knows how that place runs better than I. I have a proven track record of showing how I've accomplished many things up there as a legislator. I know where every nook and cranny of that building is. I know how the process works. I was Speaker of the House. I worked myself up from a rank-and-file freshman and been in many committees. In all due respect to Susan or Dan, they don't have that experience, and I'm telling you, it is extremely important in these times to have someone that knows how that place operates, and by the way, the legislature supports. I will guarantee you that if you went through the state legislators that are up there now, they would want to see Jim Amann sit in that office. I have almost 30 of them already that are supporting my campaign. We expect 30 or 40 more to be coming out, and you need experience in these times in order to have a successful gubernatorial campaign.
Well, certainly no doubt you know the folks that are in the legislature and would have a very easy time relating to them. We're going to have to leave it at that there. This is Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson. With us we have Jim Amann, Democratic Party candidate for the governor of the state of Connecticut. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.